I'm, as Dale said, Vice President Generation at Great River Energy. I'm also a member of Lake Country Power. My wife and I own a cabin in the Jacobson area. It's the kind of cabin that we go to year-round, winter and summer. And after this winter, I'm hoping for a lot less winter and a lot more summer. Yeah, and I voted for Mr. Simons there in the election and helped push him over the top, I hope. I think he's unopposed, right? Yeah, okay. Well, okay, let me get to the topic here. I've got a brief summary of what's going on at Great River Energy. We're a not-for-profit member-owned cooperative, just like Lake Country Power. We have 28 member co-ops, Lake Country Power, and 27 others. There's about 1.7 million people who live in the homes that we serve. We're the fourth largest generation and transmission cooperative in the United States. We have about 880 employees in Minnesota and North Dakota, 3,619 megawatts of generation. Just to give you an idea what a megawatt is, a home uses about 5 to 10 kilowatts at any given time, and a megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts. We have 701 megawatts of renewables. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute here, and 4,660 miles of transmission line. We have a triple bottom line: affordable rates, reliable electric service, and environmental stewardship. We have to do all three at the same time. Here's a little information about our generation mix. The pie chart on the left is our capacity sources. In other words, that's the capability of our power plants to produce energy in any given hour. And you can see there that we're 39% natural gas, 45% coal, 8% hydro, 2% other renewables, 4% oil, and some purchases and contracts. On the right is our energy, which is our generation from our power plants during a year. And you can see there that we're 70% coal, 12% hydro, 11% other renewables, 3% natural gas, and some contracts and purchases from others. A little bit of detail about our renewables other than hydropower. We have 468 megawatts of wind energy under contract. We have 31 megawatts of biomass that comes from a waste-to-energy plant in Elk River. And we're working on some new solar projects that total over 600 kilowatts coming online soon. We're building a 250 kilowatt project at our Maple Grove headquarters to add to the 72 kilowatts that have been there for 5 years. And Greg mentioned one of 18 projects that we're building throughout Minnesota and our members' service areas that'll be 20 kilowatts each. We had some outstanding accomplishments in 2013. Our margin exceeded our budgeted margin, which is nice. Our operating costs were below budget. We reduced our capital spending, and we had business improvement savings of over $121 million. And what those are is those are ideas that come from our employees in ways that they can do their jobs better or can avoid costs and save money for our members and thus also for you, our members' members. And we had no rate increase for 2014. We're well prepared for the future. One of the things that the board of directors decided to do in the middle of last year was to shorten the depreciation period on our coal plants. So they'll be fully depreciated in 15 years, actually 14 years from July of this year, to help us get ready for changes in our industry that we know are on the way. Even though our operating costs were below budget, our megawatt hour production was above budget in 2013. You can see on this table here that at each category of plants that we operate, we produce more megawatt hours than we expected. Mark talked about the cold winter. We're also affected, especially in southern Minnesota, by a hot summer last summer, and that helped us produce more megawatt hours than we expected. So our plants were very productive, which is nice for me. Wow, this thing's got a hair trigger. Our emission reductions have been good. We've reduced our air emissions since 2006 at our power plants. Sulfur dioxide emissions are down 56%. Various oxides of nitrogen down 40%. Carbon dioxide down 20%. And we reduced our mercury emissions by about 40%. We have a stakeholder process at Great River Energy. Every year we have internal stakeholders that we hear from. our member cooperatives. There's various advisory groups for our member cooperatives, and of course our board of directors. We have board members from our co-ops. We have 2 board members from Lake Country Power, Bob Bruckbauer and Sherman Lee Matainen. This year, when I say this year, I mean 2013, we did something new. We had an external stakeholder process also. We invited lenders, rating agencies, regulators, government officials, environmental groups, member consumers, large C&I customers. I won't read the whole list, but we invited them in for several meetings with us to talk about issues in our business. And the purpose of these stakeholder meetings is because we're confronted with transformational change in our business. We've got state and national policy that favors renewables. There's concerns about climate change, and yet we're 70% coal. We can't ignore the issues or the trends, but the rules aren't clear yet, so we decided to gather input from others beyond our members, people who we don't normally gather input from. So we've changed our approach to public policy issues in response to what we heard from them. We share and gather reaction, feedback, advice, ideas, thoughts, bring them back to our members and our board of directors and discuss them with them. Our goal is to improve and expand our thinking and to build collaboration, because we're all Minnesotans. We all are basically concerned about the same things. One of the new ideas that was developed since our external stakeholder process is a regional CO2 reduction concept that we've proposed. Under this concept, the Environmental Protection Agency would establish a target for carbon dioxide emissions for the MISO region as a whole. MISO stands for the Midwest Independent System Operator. They operate a wholesale energy market that we participate in. We buy and sell electric energy into and from this market. And we've suggested to the EPA that there be negotiations between the MISO states, Midwestern states, and the EPA, and that out of those negotiations should come a 5-year rolling average of CO2 emissions that is a target for CO2 emissions in our industry that declines over time. And from this, an advantage to us would be there'd be no individual caps on power plants or on utilities like us. Instead, we'd use the existing MISO market, which already exists to control reliability and cost. We'd use that in addition to control CO2 emissions in our region. And MISO, to do this, they would model the market's resources, load, and carbon targets, and would identify the required carbon price necessary to achieve the CO2 emission target, to try to get that lower. The carbon price would be charged to generators, to power plants, per ton of CO2 emissions, and then the revenues that were collected from that would be refunded to load, in other words, to customers, according to their megawatt hour or kilowatt hour consumption. Bear in mind, this is still a proposal. We haven't seen any results yet from EPA. But the effect of this would be that the carbon price would affect dispatch results, reducing the region's carbon intensity, the CO2 per megawatt hour. The carbon price that would result from this would allow utilities to make strategic decisions based on expected market prices, and the results would be tracked to determine whether adjustments need to be made to that carbon price. What are the advantages of this? It would utilize the existing MISO market structure. So wouldn't have to create some new market. Optimization would ensure continued focus on cost and reliability as well as CO2 emissions. And we'd avoid direct control of plant emissions, minimizing inefficiencies and the cost of regulation. We'd apply an efficient carbon price without flowing a tax to the government. The refunds would be made back to the load or back to the customers, and would allow for regional influences on national policy. The Midwest is different than other parts of the country. This is an example of an innovative idea that we have developed to lead us through the current period of change in our industry. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. You can learn more about us at greatriverenergy.com. And Mr. President, before I leave the podium here, I have a $1,000 check to present to Lake Country Power to Operation Roundup. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick.